The What to Read Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Laura and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show's for you. Hi, Elle. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, Laura. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I write under the name Elle Diaz. I am an upcoming debut contemporary author. My book, How That Makes You Feel, comes out on Valentine's Day. And I'm also the co-host of Makeout Already, which is a romance novel and anything with a happily ever after recap podcast, where listeners would know me as Liz.
Gosh. All right. So let's chat about the podcast. How did you get started?
So my friend Meg and I started it during lockdown.
Yeah.
And it was something that we talked about before lockdown because I helped her get into romance novels. I listened to a bunch of romance podcasts. So we were kind of planning it and talking about it before lockdown. And then lockdown happened and we made it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really evolved into, so what we do is we kind of have a structure where we fan cast the books that we recap. We talk about who the worst half is, so who it is in the couple, if it is a twosome, who is the worst partner and maybe needs to do more work to keep the other person. We share recipes. I'm really into tarot, so sometimes we'll pull tarot cards for what is going to happen to this couple after the book and what advice can we give them. And we also watch a lot of movies. Every December, Meg makes me watch a bunch of Christmas movies and recap them. So we have a lot of that as well.
I love this. And so you've been having fun creating the podcast, and just when will you say someone who's like starting out a podcast or thinking like, I want to have my friend, we should have a podcast,
I think you should just do it. It has made me feel like more comfortable with being seen, if that makes sense, like more of myself. And I would say you don't need expensive equipment to start out with. Meg and I started recording on our phones with just the headphones that come with an iPhone. And we've got a few pieces of tech since then and gotten better at editing, but it's still I've got my foam tiles on the wall, but it's still a pretty economic setup. So
you have a better setup than I do, and I've been doing this for 5 years. I'm just straight up doing it on like microphone and just like computer.
Can I tell you that I have a hard time hearing any audio differences on podcasts? And I know that there are people who I've recorded with who have sound booths and are very meticulous about editing, and I'm sure they hear the difference. So good for them for making the effort. But I don't have as a refined ear.
Yeah, I don't have it either. And I'm like, people just care about conversations, hanging out with friends, especially with the like bookish podcasts. They just want to know like either what books you read or like what things are like what we should be looking for. So that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for the most like, refined sound.
Yeah. The most polished product.
No. So awesome. So let's chat about your writing journey. When did you start writing?
I started writing as soon as I knew how to write. And it's only been I studied creative writing and literature and magazine journalism in college. And it's only been through my journey with romance novels that I've finally understood story structure. And I think that I was always meant to be a romance writer because in my college writing workshops, my professors would always tell me that I had really strong characters and plot, but that I always wrap things up too neatly at the end.
Sure.
And it's like, I hated reading like really beautiful literary masterpieces that had ambiguous or tragic endings. It's like, wait, and one of my recommendations is a book with an ambiguous ending, but it's one of the only ones that I'll give a pass to. And I like at the end knowing what happened and that everything worked out. So my writing process has really depended on the change in what I read over the years, but
Mhm.
it's always been a part of my life. I've always written poetry and short stories and started a million projects and had lots of trouble finishing them.
And so, what was it writing your debut novel? Like, let's talk about the elevator pitch, and then we'll talk about the writing journey because it's like it's a process. Like, now the things are gonna get seen. You know.
So, my book is about whether two works in progress can make it work after being their worst selves in previous relationships.
Mhm.
And if you watched Crazy Ex Girlfriend and you want to know what happens after Rebecca, the main character, recovers from borderline personality disorder, then this book is for you. It's about a divorced therapist who herself is recovering from mental illness. She meets a guy who is back in their hometown to care for his sister after their mother's death, and he was estranged from her. There are two people who are looking for different things in their lives, and they're also not in a great place of like wanting to be in a relationship, but the vibes are happening. They try to keep it casual, but they it turns out are not two people who are good at keeping it casual.
Yes. Oh, I need this book. I
I
need this
would
book.
love to send it to you.
Yeah, I need this book because I'm like, I have a thing about like, your worst self. I think it's not your worst self. It's just like when you're struggling, you have to heal yourself, and the
Mhm.
process of healing is like the process of discovering who you are. At the same time, being in a relationship with another person brings a whole lot of issues, and
It does.
it's a brighter stream, you know,
Yeah.
to have a book, that can give you that whole process. So, what was the process of writing? Like, how did this idea come about? What was this like
This
gem of the idea?
uh well, this book started like I don't know, 8 years ago or something,
Yeah,
maybe longer, as a speculative dystopian adult novel, if you could believe that. And I was writing it for NaNoWriMo and it was a hot mess, but I was really drawn to the two characters. And
yeah.
what did stay was that one was a therapist, one was running the family jewelry store and had lost a parent, and everything else changed. And then I
Mhm.
started writing it as a romance, but I was writing it in first person. Then I got really into reading books that were third person alternating. So I rewrote it as that. And then I got really serious about hitting the story beats and getting feedback. So I was writing this book on and off for like a decade, and it was not this book for a long time. So this book took me like a decade to write, and it also took me 6 months to write.
I love this journey because it's somewhat telling of like our own reading taste because our reading journey 8 to 10 years ago, we were reading dystopian. Like that was what
Mm-hmm.
was selling. That was what we were reading. That's what we were doing. It's like 12 years ago, 14 years ago was paranormal, and now it's like dystopian,
Mm-hmm.
post-apocalyptic. And now we come to 2023 and we live through dystopia, and it's just
Yeah.
online. Let's get out
I
there.
don't need to put more of it out into the world.
No, we just need happily ever afters.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
So that is what I have tried to provide. And I am hoping that I can internalize everything that I learned from this journey and write my next book in 6 to 8 months instead of 6 to 8 years.
Yeah. So what's the process of self-publishing? You're self-publishing,
Mhm.
So what's the process for you as a new author? Like what's been the most fascinating and most interesting thing and the thing that you were surprised about the process?
I think I was surprised by realizing that self-published authors are just as devoted to their craft and put in as much time and as much like teamwork
Mm-hmm.
into their books, and also how many things in the process I could do myself, like designing a cover or doing marketing, which is something that I'm still feeling out how to do. Um, but I liked learning that there is this whole community of people who I could have access to. I worked with an amazing editor, Jen Reed's Romance from Fated Mates. She helped me with developmental edits on my book, and it made a world of difference in just unblocking what I was trying to make happen with the book. And I've just loved seeing that people are out here putting their art into the world and not waiting for a publisher to tell them that it is worthy of being presented.
Mhm.
And I think that I years ago definitely had that stigma about not wanting to self-publish, about wanting to have that publisher stamp of approval. And then seeing how many people I loved and respected are self-published or hybrid authors, that was really surprising.
Yeah, I think there's like it has changed. I've been a reader. I've always been a reader, but I've been a romance reader since 2016. And I remember most of 2016, 2017, what I could afford was self-publishing books. Where like
Mm-hmm.
I was reading on my phone in a job where I had nothing to do. So I was buying
Mm-hmm.
whatever Amazon was telling me to read. And I was like,
Yeah.
it was that and Kindle Limited, and like I loved it. And then life happened. I was like, I established myself as a book brand, and I started reading all those publishing books. But I went back to my passion, which is indie books, because I feel like for them, there's a little bit of rawness, there's a little bit of edginess, like
Mm-hmm.
there's risks that are being taken that traditional publishers sometimes are like, no, 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 that's not gonna sell you, you know. And it's
Which is
like,
such a shame.
damn, because it's gatekeeping the good stuff. It's gatekeeping people of color. It's gatekeeping like, genres that you never thought it was possible. Like, yeah, we need some alien romance. We need some monster romance.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need some darker stuff, like serial killers, whatever it is. We'll try it.
Yeah. Discovering Kindle Unlimited in the early days of COVID and
Yeah,
binge reading all of Ice Planet Barbarians, which everyone starts as a joke.
yeah.
Like you read the first book as a joke, and then you're like six
Oh,
books deep by the next day. So um that also just helped me become braver in my writing. Like people are out here taking big risks in their writing. So why not me?
why not you? And yeah, I love this. I tell, new authors, people who are writing NaNoWriMo and stuff like that, yes, you can aspire to get an agent, but the agent doesn't have to come before your first draft. It can come after you publish your draft. It can come at any moment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the publisher can come at any moment. Like, we've seen this. Like, you can be a hybrid, you can be this, you can
Mm-hmm.
be that, but it's like just take the risk, work on your craft, put it out there, get it seen. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
You can find, like your audience. Like your audience will
Yeah.
know. So
And that's what I'm hoping for, that this book will find its people. And everyone's writing journey is so individual. And I just love seeing how people have done different things with their career and what they prioritize and their values through their business as a writer.
yeah, I love this. All right, let's chat some book recommendations. You mentioned you read romance book. What kind of book recommendations do you have for us?
Okay, so I realized that the theme of the books that I'm recommending is kind of what I like to write about, which is messy people just doing their best.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is, I'm kind of cheating because it's a duology, but you have to read both.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Carl's duology by Hank Green. I love me some science dilf Hank Green. And so I read his books, an absolutely remarkable thing. And oh gosh, the titles are so weird. So I have to find the other one. It's a beautifully foolish endeavor.
Okay.
So it's a duology about basically space robots appearing randomly all across the world and everyone losing their minds over it. And the first person to capture an image of it is a college age girl who decides that she's going to become a social media sensation off of this when it turns out that these robots have landed all over the world. And the first book is a lot about persona and who gets attention, who gets to speak and be listened to, and the consequences of having a platform. And then the second book is a lot about technology companies and the responsibility of having this much power over humanity and who should get to wield it, if anyone should get to wield it. But they're really funny. They have a great cast of characters. And I think that they should be a generation defining book. Like, what they're so different, but I think that Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower is one of the books that I would say really captures this moment in history. And then another side of this moment in history, I would say Hank Green's duology captures it, which is the tech side. So that would be my first recommendation. Stop me if I'm saying
Yeah.
too much about all of these.
No, you're good. Take your time.
Okay. So the next one is a romance by Tiffany Rice, and it's called The Rose. And it is about a young woman who secretly runs an escort service with her friends, and she gets into a little bit of trouble with that. She gets this present from her parents that is a rare artifact, and this collector comes and says, hey, what you have is actually a really important mythological artifact that has these magical powers, and the magical powers enable them to reenact Greek myths, but in a really sexy way. And it is so hot and so creative. And I love Greek mythology, and I love a retelling. And this takes a completely different take on it because it's not a retelling. It's very much contemporary, with the myths being a separate thing that then the characters embody. It's just a really cool concept.
I need to read her book. I think I got that book in the mail at one point. I got like a Tiffany Rice, and I was like, what is this all about? And then I
Mm-hmm.
read her Harlequin Place trilogy. Have you read that trilogy?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's so good. It's the best trilogy of like non-Christmas holiday romance. It's a Halloween, a Thanksgiving romance, and a Hanukkah slash December. And there's sexy times, they're category ones, so there's like 200 pages.
That
My
sounds
favorite
so
one is
cool.
favorite was the Thanksgiving one. It's like a Thanksgiving related, you know?
I'm definitely putting that on my TBR because
Yeah,
especially the Halloween one, I
yeah.
love Halloween romances.
Yeah, so that's like it's a fall series that, you know, everyone who's a romance reader should read them and should add them to the TBR.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah. All right, so what's your next one? Is it the ambiguous ending or
Yes. So my next one has an ambiguous ending, and it would be big spoilers to even tell you, but let's say it's not a romance. It's really about one woman's journey. And this book might be my favorite book. And it was a huge influence in what I was trying to achieve with how that makes you feel, because it focuses on someone who has struggled with mental illness, with someone who's very defined by her past relationships and grief, and who is sober. So the heroine in my book is sober as one of the ways to manage her borderline personality disorder. So I loved the way that this book weaved in wove how it used her past and gradually revealed it to explain what the present moment of her trying to be in a new relationship means in the context of her life. And it's just so beautiful. It's one of the most gorgeous books I've ever read. And everyone in it is just so complicated. And that's my jam.
so what's the title?
Oh, it's called Falling Under by Danielle Young Ullman. I get so excited talking about this book. I get like flustered. I get like Jenna Ortega gets around
Yeah.
what's her name? Tall woman.
Oh my God. I love this. So now I need to add this. You had me at borderline personality disorder. You had me at past viewing stories. You know, I've been in therapy. I've been on a therapy journey. I don't have BPD. I have some sort of trauma related, but
Mm-hmm.
I study a lot of like, memoirs and personal first person essays because it helps you kind of like understanding,
Mm-hmm.
your patterns. So it's funny. I'm like looking at, I'm like, you gave me some recommendations. I'm like, oh, these are other opportunities for you to explore. Yeah,
Yeah, I was specifically looking for books dealing with mental health when I
yeah,
found Falling Under.
yeah. So I love this.
And Gwendolyn Christie is the actress I was referring to. I was having a complete brain shutdown.
Really great. So, Elle, tell us where we can find you online and where we could, where, when can we buy the book?
Okay, so the book comes out on February 14th, 2023, and you can pre-order it now. Online, you can find me at Twitter and Instagram as Elle Diaz Romance, and I'm at lddiazromance.com. So it's really easy to find me everywhere. And the Makeout Already podcast. So you can check us out there. All our social media handles for that one are different, but just find us in your favorite podcatcher and the links will be there.
Thank you all for being at the show.
Thank you so much for having me.